repeat to discuss about the GS one men's writing to test. To what extent can the environmental government be called as a social movement and trace its the journey and in the post-independent India the environmentals and the movement is other type of the social movement and that the involve can the argue then the area of the institution individuals and group and the coalitions and that the perceives a common interested in the environmental protections and act to bring about the changes in environmental policies and practices. Environmental movement is other social movement fight for the local rights and thus movement are important for the tribals and rights and especially and the right of the access and to forest the resources livelihood forest resources are the sources of the livelihood for local communities. Environmental movements are important to safeguard theirs the livelihood and prevented the non and commercial use of the naturals and resources ecological health and thus the movements are important for the preventions of the land degradation and cultural and the displacement and eco the restoration and the contributions the core themes the movement and raised and noble issues and like the environmental and degradations participations the movement and where the massive and with the active participations of the marginalized and group and the socials includingly tribals and women's and strategy are the adaptation non-violence and the society inclusive the strategy and pressures on the government and many of the new and the environmental government and forced the government to take and the affirmatives and policies in the forms of new laws and provisions. The Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra's Gujarat and Ghats. The environment movement journey in post-independence India Chipko movement years 1973 and place in the Chamoli districts and later aid the Tehri and the Gahar World districts of the Uttarakhand and leaders the Sundar Lal, Bahugudas and the Gora Devi etc. The main and demand of the pupils in thus the protested and was that the benefits of the forest and especially the rights to the forests and should go to the local pupils and the Chipko movement and gathered momentums in 1978 and when the women faced police and the firings and others the tortures. Safe Silence and Valley Movement 1978 place. Silent Valley and the evergreens and tropical forest in the Palakkad districts of the Kerala's India's and leaders and the Kerala Sastras and the Sanhitas Parishad and KSSB and the NGOs and the poet activists and the Sunghat Kumarian played and the important role in the Silent Valley protest. Aims in the orders to the protect the Silent Valley the most and the evergreens forest from the being destroyed and by other electrical projects. Jangal Bachao and Andolans years 1982 and the place and the Singha Bhumi districts of the Bihar and leaders the tribals of the Singha Bhumis and aims against the government decisions to replace the naturals sal forest with the thick Apico movement years 1983 and the place and the Uttara and Kannada's and the Shimoga districts of the Karnataka's state and leaders. Apico greatest strength lies in its the wings and neighbors and driven by other personality and nor having been and the formally institutionalized. However, it is does have either facilitated in the Pendorangs and Hegde, and he helped launch the movement in 1983 against the failing and commercializations of the natural forest and the ruin of the ancient livelihood. Narmada Bachao Andolan MBA year 1985 and placed the Narmada rivers and which flows the through the state of the Gujarat and Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra leaders Medha and Malkar. Bada Amte and Adivasi formers environmentalist and the human rights activities. A social movement against the number of large dams and being the built across the Narmada rivers. Tehri Dam conflict year 1919 place. the Bhagirathi and rivers and near the Tehri in Uttarakhand and leaders the Sundarlal Bahugada aims the protected and was the against the displacement of towns and inhabitants and the environmental consequences of the weak ecosystems and save the Dehing and Patkai years 2020 places. Assam's leaders prominent and personalities like the Adil Hussain and Randeep Hooda and Joyce and Barua and Jadhav and the Peg and known as the Forest and Men of India. Members of all Assam's Student Union AASU and all the Assam's and Matak and Youth Student Unions. Reasons and open cast minings in the 1998 and point the 59 and hectares of Dehings the Patkai and wildlife sanctuaries and save the Sundarbans years 2020 place West Bengal. Reasons: recent cyclone and Ambok, the worst cyclone since the 1737, left the trail of the misery in the Sundarbans and livelihood where the destroy pupils where the displaced. Conclusion: presently, environment movement is gaining global prominence and NGOs like the Green Places and organizations like the United Nations are taking steps to save the environments on other global scales and the mitigates and climate changes. Different nations are also the makings there's the effort and to save the environments and the development sustainable examples. International Solar Alliance why the India's and France compares the Western and the Indians models of the secularism and discuss whether the Indians and concept of the secularism is flawed and compared and to the Westerns. 1. Introductions. Secularism refers and to the purpose of separations of government institution and persons mandated to represent the state and from the religious and institution and the religious dignities. Parameter West India's and concept the spheres of the politics in separate in sphere the spheres of the politics is the separated from the spheres of religious equals distance and from all the religious. The rational in the best religious and was all the encompassing and the church was the dominating the states and wanted to the curtails this the authority has the conflict and religious to private space and accommodating and religious diversities. Extent of the separation of the mutually and exclusively porous religion. Porous and religious cannot the intervene and in the matters of politics and but the policies can the intervene in the matters of the religious understanding of the liberty or the freedoms. Intra-religion homogeneous and the society individuals freedoms and both the intra and religious individuals community and the minority freedoms. The Western models in the scientific management of the public spheres and while the Indians models is based on the principles and of the coexistence. The concept of the secularism is not the failed and but in the fact and more the appropriated and to the Indian context the ban and vastness styles and secularism multiple religions and India's history. India's history is very the distinct and from that of the Western Ghast and most of which and had two ideals with only and one the religions before the onset of the modern nation states and the legal code etc. Deep religious diversities is an integral part of the India's and social and the cultural landscapes and second the commitment to multiple values and namely the liberty, equality and fraternity not receive only to individuals and but the interpreted and broadly to covers the relative and the autonomy of the religions and communities and their the equalities of the status in society granting aid and to the educational institutions over the non-preferentials and basis and the interference in the social religions institution and that daddy and the equals and then dignities and the status to the members of theirs amongst the religious or to those of the others, and examples the ban on the untouchabilities and the temples entry to everyone. The depublications and the depolitications. The state is not the identified and with the particulars and the particulars and religious public, and the recognition is granted to the religious and the community. Some negatives of the secularism, and the secularism is challenging the unique cultures and practices of the times, and seculars is linkage and to the Christianity and ie and the western, and they are therefore the unsuited to Indians and the condition. There is also other view and that the secularism and promotes vote bank politics. Conclusion: Indian secularism is not the end to itself, and but are the means to address the religious and the plurality and the short to achieve peaceful existence of different religion. Evolution: the contribution of the Jainism and Buddhism to Indian cultures. Jainism and Buddhism developed in the 6th centuries and are the part of the sermons and the tradition, which is the contributions to the Vedic philosophies and the times and teachings of the Buddhas and the Mahaviras cast and spells over the Indians mass in due and the courses of time, and both the made are the great contribution to Indian cultures. Contribution of the Buddhism and the Jainism to Indian culture. Arts, architectures, sculptures and paintings, development of the language and literatures, development of the religions, morals, value and the ethical conducts and rejections of rituals, caste-lit society, protections of natures and animals. Contribution of the Buddhism to Indian culture: architecture, sculptures and painting. One of the most prominent contributions of Buddhism to Indian culture is in the state of arts, architecture, sculptures and paintings. Sanchi stupas decorated and with the torans and Bharhut Spud and the Amravati Spud is one of the fine example of the architecture. Biharas and the Chaityas and bear the world. It the Sanchi and the Bharhut and Nalanda and Bodh Gayas are the spectacles and the showcases the florizings and arts of the Buddhism. Gandhara, Sarnath and the Amravati school of the sculptures bear the various visuals contribution of the Buddhist and to the Indian culture. The painting of the Ajantas and which they received the climax during the Gupta's eras and the depict various and life scenes of the Buddhas and development of the language and the literature. Initially to reach the common peoples and Buddhas and impeach is the passages in the Pali language and which was the language of the common peoples, and later when the Mahayanas and the Buddhists emerged and Buddha teachings and were the peaches in the Sanskrit and language. The spirit of the Buddhism and along with thus the language and enriched the language and the literature of the Sanskrit and the Pali language. Tripitakas and where the conflict where the completed in the Pali languages, and the Buddha Charitas and why the Ashwaghoshas is written in the Sanskrit language and to society in Buddhist and denounced and the priorities of the Brahmins on the ground of the birth and as the Buddhas and maintained it was the karmas and action that the determines the laws and the high state of other beings, and thus the Buddhas did away and with all the social distinctions between the men and achieved the social justice theory by and the helped to the achieve other caste society. Admission to the sanghas and was open to men and the women alike. Population and the simple religions. The rules and the principles of the Buddhism was very the simple rejections of performance of rituals and Brahmins. Inclusions of women and the Sudras into the Sudras and made the religion simpler, and this the easily attract a large action of society. Education system. The Buddhist viharas and the monasteries and were the center of the education. The viharas, monastery and took up the teachings and works not only for the monks and but also the others and the seekers of knowledge and from the outside. Universities of Nalandas, Ballabhi and Vikramshilas and the Jagdals and the Udantpuris connected between the India and the foreign countries. The Buddhist monk and the scholars travels to many other countries teachings about the teaching of the Buddhas and the springs of the birth of the Buddhism and from the 3rd century BCE and onwards and in the making Buddhism a the prominent religion in Asia. Moral values, the concept of the ahimsas and was it is the chief and the contributions later it becomes one of the cherished and values of the our nations. Apart and from this, the Buddhism and the emphasis and the equalities and love the compositions it is which and the enables the cultivations and of thus and the values. Why many great and the leaders like the Gandhis and the Swami and Vivekananda etc. Politicals and views in the Buddhism and Sanghas and every the members of the Sanghas and has and the equal voice and the workings of the Sanghas and was on the domestic lines and every the decisions of the Sanghas was the, done used based on the rule of the majorities. Thus Bodhism and made the openings of other new and the chapter to the introduction of the democratics critic principle in the history of the Indian and the religious orders. Contribution of the Jainism to the Indians and culturals. Art and architectures and sculptures, the spirit of the Jainism and the immensely contribution and to the development of the temples in various parts of India. Temples at the Mount Abu in the Rajasthan and the Parshvanathas at the Khajuraho and the Janan Nathas Puras and the Vashadi in the Karnataka. Kept temples in the Ahole, Badami and Elloras and the Udhe Giri Hills and are the fine contributions by Jainism to the developed of the cave and temples. Sculptures, modelings of the image or the status and of theirs the Tirthankaras and the largest free standing status of Bahubali in the Shravan Golas and is other fine example. Philosophy, it is leaps in the Anekant Vadas and the Syavadas and the doctrines. It is teach the ways to the liberalization and other path to the spirituals and purities and enlightenment and through the disciplinary and non-violence to all the livings and creations. It is and the ideas and that the across in reactions and to the Brahminical sacrifices rituals language and the literatures and Prakrit language and which was the followed by the Venas and to the preaches. The teaching of the Tirthankaras and letters led and to the development of various languages like the Marathi, Kannadas, etc. Literature of the Jainism is not only the written in the Ardha and the Magdi and part of the Prakrit language and but also in the Sin and the Sanskrit and Kannadas and Gujarati, Rajasthani, etc. Ethical code and one of the significant contributions of the Jainas is the Ahimsa cultures. And Jainism and the considers all livings the beings and not just the humans equals and the Jainism says all the souls are equals and alike and have similar natures and the qualities and thus it is the cultivates and the altitude of the equalities and towards all living beings and peaceful religious and Jainism emphasizes winning over your the internal enemies and like the angers, greed and hatred etc. rather than the wagings and wars on the others and Mahaviras and said it is the better to the win and other and overs the self and then to the win and over the billions enemies. Growth of the trading communities and Jainism and contribution a lot to the growth of the traditions communities and it the first Jainism become population among the traders and the merchants It the fosters and brotherhoods among them, and which gave rises to the guide system in future and rejected the dominions of the Brahminicals and caste society. Conclusion: Jainism and the Buddhism followed their the unique and path to the achieving social reforms and oppositions the orthodox philosophies of that eras, and they had other significant impact on the Indian culture by way of developing and unique religious art and architecture, language, etc. What were the changes and brought by the Bhakti and the Sufi movements in India and the societies, and briefly the emphasis on the contribution of any the two and the Bhakti and the Sufi Sant introductions. The Bhakti movement originated and between the 6th and the 8th century AD and in the southern parts of India, and especially the Tamil Nadu is spread and northward, and from the end of the 5th century Sufism and entered India in the 12th century and with the Muslims and invaders and becomes the populars in the 13th century and through both started in the different period, and they the stress and the elements of love and the devotions as and the effectives and means of the realizations of God body. Changes brought by the both Bhakti and the Sufi movement in India and society: equality of beings. Body changes brought by the both and the Bhakti and the Sufi and movement in Indian society: equality of the being. Both and the movement propagated equality and the brought the spirituals and of the universal brothers and of man, and they rejected any the social qualification based on the caste, class, and the genders, and against the rigidity in societies and rejections of the rituals. Both movements were against the Brahminical orthodoxies and the ritualistic and practices that won that were the promoted by themes and they and the displeased and the priest and who were the acting as the middle men and between the individuals and God, means of the salvations, as both the disgraded ritualistic practices as the men and to the achieving salvations, and the emphasis and the devotionals to the God as other new and means of the salvation, the ultimate and God of the both and movement, and was the unions and with the God and to achieve and this the goals, and both the emphasis the need for the Guru and the Shishya and Peer and the Mursidiyas and the tradition. They laid great emphasis on the love, on the bond and between the God and the individuals. Development of the religious language, Bhakti and the Sufi Sant and preached, and there the teaching and through the language, and that can the easily and be the understood by the common pupils, and this led to the development of religious language and like the Kannadas, Marathis and Orias and Bhojpuri etc. And for instance, and Bengalis was the used and by the Chetyas and the Assamese, and was the popularized by the Sankyas and in the Assam, in Gujarat, and the credit for the popularizing the Hindi and the language and goes to the Shekhas and Kuwait, Sheikh Qutub and Alam and the Sheikh and Ahmad Khatu uplift the positions of the women, the followers and the Bhakti movement, and allow and both men and the women and to seek the salvation, and Mirabais and Andals, the Akka and the Mahadevis and the Bibi Fatima, the first woman and Sufi Sant of the India, and were the sum of the women and Sant. Both movement also the condemned and females and the infanticides and the promoted and the freedoms of the women. Promotion of the social services, Bhakti movement and brought the development and services to follow the humans and beings, the Sufi movement and preachment services to the humanity and services to God, and development of the communities and kitchen and hostels and providing the food and shelters for the poor and travelers, and unity among the Hindu and the Muslims. The synthesis of the both and Bhakti and the Sufi movement helped to bridge the gap between and the Hindu and the Muslim communities. Muslim communities and brings and them and closest to the each others. The Sant of the Bhakti movement and the Sufi and the Sant spread and messages of the friendships, amenities, the tolerance and peace and the equality among all. The Bhakti movement contribution of the Guru Nanaks and Guru Nanaks was the founders of the Sikhism and is the first of the 10 Sikhs and Gurus and his teachings and the incorporated and the noblest principles of the both Hindu and the Islam's religions. According to the hymn, and God is the omnipresent and the throats and love the devotions and purity of the soul. Everyone can the attain God and grace. His teachings and where to the have faith in God and the contributions and worships of his the name and necessary of the Guru in the worships of God. He was against. He was against ideal worships and rejected the theories of the reincarnations, and he introduced the concept of the community kitchens and langars. He was the proponent of the Nirguna's schools of the Bhakti movement. According to him, God is the formless and God is the without any the attributes. And Guru Nanak and neighbors the belief in other trinity of gods or the belief of that the God can be the one in the human forms. In Sikhism, he tires to harmonies and both the Hinduism and Islam's. Bhashwanas, he was the 12th and century administrator, philosophers and poet and the Lingayat and Sant in the Shiva and focused and Bhakti movement. He raised the social awareness and through his the poetry and popularly and known as the Vich Nas, and he introduced and knew the publics and institutions and such as the Anu Bhavas and Mantapas or the whole of the spiritual experience and which the welcomes and men and the women from all the socio-economic backgrounds and to discuss the spirituals and the mandates questions of life in opens. And he was other propagators of the Visishtha Dvitas and Vaishvanas and literaries and works includes the Vechnas and the Sanhitas, and in the Kannada's language he is also known as the Bhakti Bandharis and the Vaishnavas and the Osa and Bhasa. Veshwara's contribution of Sufi Sant and the Khwajas and the Moinuddin Chishti. He found the Chishti and orders in India and the Khwaja and Moinuddin Chishti and emphasizes the oneness with the God and the devotions to the divine and dealings are the poor life and the sowing, the compassion and charity and for the helpless and poor. He emphasizes the doctrine of the unity and with the good and rejected all the materials goods and as the distractions from the contemplations of gods, and his the sermons and impressed and millions of the Hindus and the Muslims to move the towards the path of the true unity. He fulfilled the objectives of the bringing together the various caste communities and races, the elevating and humanities and from the swarms of the materialistic concern. He popularized music and recitations and called the Samas and the Mehboob I and the Ilahi. He kept the Christianity and orders away and from the royal courts estates. Recitation of the name of the God and both the allowed and the silently formed the corners stones of Christianity practices and the Ferodosias, and it was the only Sufi orders and which was the founded and the develops and in India. It was founded by the Sharafuddin. It was the conflict and to the Bihar and he the composed and the Muktubat and the Mulfazat and literature. The above dealt and with the leaves and the teachings of the Sufi Sant and conclusion. with such long-lasting impact and gap in the society and were set aside the teachings ensured the restoring status to the suppress and classes are deep-rooted changes and come about to the lay the foundations in liberals and the composite Indian society. Sufism founders in India, Khwaja Moinuddin Chishti and the Sheikh and the Bahaduruddin Zakias and Nizamaz Uddin and the Khwaja. Bhakti movement started from the south to north India, South India. Saguna's school with the attributed and worshipping devotions of others and Vishnu land and the incarnations and goddess Devi Shiva. 6th century AD and 10th century AD in Tamil Nadu. Nirguna's school without the attributes and the gained and prominented mainly from the 13th century onwards and list of the prominent Nirgunas and Sant givings in the latter half of the books. Alvaras, Tamil poets and the Sant and the devotees and Lord Vishnu. They both the opposed than the Jainism and Buddhism and Nyanaras and the Tamil poets and Sant and the devotees of the Lord Shivas. Question number 13. Explain with the examples the various style of the temple architecture in India with the special emphasis on the Dravidian architecture. Introduction. The architecturals and styles of the temples and explained and the moded based and on their the regimes and ethnicity and linguistics and the diversity and there are the three important style of the temple architecture Nagaras in the north and the Dravidian in the south and the Vaisharas and the independent and style and the blended of the Nagaras and the Dravidian model body. Temple architecture in India three style Nagara style Odisha schools and the Khajuraho school and the Solanki schools. Dravidian style and the Vaishalas style and other styles. Nayakas and the Hoysalas and the Vijayanagars and Pal and Sen. Some common foundations and features of the Hindu temples. Sanctions and the Garbhagrihas and the literaries and bomb house and smalls the cubicles and with other singles and the entrance which grow into the larger and the chambers and the garbhagrihas and is made to the house the man and icons the entrance to the temples and the porticos and hall for other large numbers of worshippers and is known as the mandapas and mountain like the spire. The shape of the carvings and the shekhars is North India's and other pyramidals. Towers and called other vimanas and in the South India's and the Vahan and mount or the vehicles and of the temples and the men and the deity all along with other standard and pillars or the dwars and is placed actually before the sanctums and mithun and the embracing couples and sculptures considered and auspicious are the places at the entrance of the temple or on in the exteriors and wall or the between the mandhapas and the main shrines. Nagara temple styles and the developed in the northern India. It and the followed and the panchayatans styles of the temple buildings and it had the man and the shrines and the subsidiary and the shrines and laid out in other crucified and the patterns and with the respected to the man shrines and there is other mandaps in the front of the garbhagrihas and the no and water tanks is the present on temple and the premise and the temples and were built on the raised platforms and outside the garbhagrihas and the images of the Gangas, Yamunas and were places and the Shikharas and were of the three tiers. Latinas squares at the base and walls and curved inwards the to the point at the top and the palm shinas and they had other borders and base and were the shoulders in height and then the Latin and ones and the slopes is upward is in other straight lines. Bulbi, they had the rectangular base with other roof and risings into the vaulted chambers. The Shikharas had other Kailas on tops of its the restings and on other circular base and called the Ama. Luck at the insides and the temples, the walls and were the divided into the three and the vertical planes and the three rathas and the temples and the promises how no had no the gopurams and the gateways and the boundary walls. Khalsa Amalkas and Nagaras temples architecture, Garbhgrihas and deity and Pite, Shia's steppe and Dravinia's temple architecture. Dravidian or South Indian temple architecture. The Dravidian temples is the enclosed and within the compound and wall and the entrance and gateway in its the center and known as the Gopurams. The shell of the main temple's towers known as the Vimanas in the Tamil Nadu is other stepped and pyramids and that rises up the geometrically and there is other large waters and reserves or other temples or other temples tank enclosed within the complex and subsidiary shrines are the incorporated and within the main temple's towers and presented as other separated small shrines besides the main temples. Kanchipuram and the Thanjavurs or the Tanjores, Madurai and the Kumba Konams and Tamil Nadus and where during the 8th and 12th centuries the role of the temples included the religious matters and as the administratives centers controlling the vast areas of the land and palas and were one of the ancient South and Indian dynasty which is spread to the Odisha's borders, the early and buildings, where the rock cut and whiles the letters and once the wear and the structurals and are the generally reflected the reasons of Mahendra Burmans and first and is the contemporary of the Chalukyas kings and the Pulketians second of the Karnatakas and the show temples at the Mahabalipurams and also known as the Raja Shimmas and who the resides and from the 700 to 728 CE. Mamallapuram and was the named after the Narasingha Varmans and first and also known as the Mamallapuram. 728 CE and the Mamallapuram and was named after the Narsimbarman and first and also known as the Mamalla. The temple houses and the shrines and two the ships and the facing facts and the middles and one of the Vishnus and facing the west and there is other evidence of either water tank either nearly example of other Gopuram, sculptures of the bull and the Nandi and lines the temple's walls. Vaishya styles of the temple of the architecture influences of the Nagaras and the Dravidian style similar to the Nagaras school and the shrines plans and the subsidiary shrines and the Panchayatas styles. Similarly to Odisha's temples and vestibule and the connecting the sanctums and the mandapas and the similarly to the Shekhari and the Bhumiji and the pillars in NE. India's the resemblance and to the majority of the Karnataka of the temples pillars in Karnataka. Stepped demand plans and seen in the Chalukyas temples Nagaras steppings. Demands or the stelae plains in seen in the majority of the temples in Kalyanis. The Dravidian influences early half of the Chalukyas era is presented in the Vimanas of the Chalukyas temples in the Chalukyas and temples and initiators. Ornaments, towers and walls, the ornamentation exhibits a the mixed of the Nagaras and Dravidian styles. Conclusion: every the period of India history and the produced it is the avance distinct styles and features. The architecture style of the temples is the plaid and the monded and based on theirs. The regimes ethnically and linguistics and diversities, and they are the examples and the India rich cultural heritage. And briefly the outlines the important features of the various forms of the puppetry in India. What steps have been taken? What steps have been briefly outline the importance and features of the various form of the puppetry and what steps have been taken at the different level to preserve them. Introduction: puppetry is other forms of the theaters or the performance in which is the involve the manipulations of the puppetry. It is the believed and to have it is the origins and 3000 years BC, and while the shadows puppetry is and the unsigned forms of the story and tellings and which is used and flayed the articulated features shadow the puppets and to create the impressions of moving humans and important and features of various forms of the puppetry in India. Categories of the puppetry in India: the shrink puppets, the putli and the kandhai and the gombeattu and the bomalattam and the Thotu and the Bomatlata and the Ravan Chayas and the Togatu and Kombata, Pavakattu, Yampuri and the Putul and the Nacha, Odisas and Rode the puppets. Shadow puppets. Features and example: there are the fleet and the transparency and leather leathers or the paper cutouts and fastened and to the one supporting sticks and many manipulated and by aid the list and to the others and this thin and sticks or the road. It is also about the judgings and the perfect and balance between the light and the screens and the correct and manipulations of the both will and the result in other project of other gorgeous and the silhouette and the colorfuls and the shadow. In Karnataka, traditional forms of the shadows and puppetry size and rejected the reflected and the social status of the characters and that they and play. The largest and puppetry are for the royals and the religious members, and while the smaller puppet and the depict the commons and pupils are the servants. The performance and begins at the night and the continues to tells and the innovations to the Hindus and gods the Ganeshas and Saraswati sign the starts of the shadow. String puppets. The puppets are made of the wood and the long following the decoration sticks and head on the leg. A puppet is manifested by the streaking usually and 5 to the 7 attachment into the triangular bones. Triangular bullet control. In Odisha. In Odisha, the end of the streaking are the tied and to other triangulars and buttons, frame or to other horizontal bars. In Rajasthan, they are the simply and looped and around the puppeters and the fingers, and streaking puppets and are the assumed to predate the Indian classical theatres. Example: Putal Nach Assam and Gombeatta and Karnataka and the Kala Sutri and the Bahulya and Maharashtra and the Gop Leela and Kandheri Odisha and Katputli and Rajasthan and Bombalattam Tamil Nadu. The number of the string can vary the according to and the traditionals and more the string and translated into other major and the more complex range of the attained and movements. Road puppets are an the extension of the globes and puppet, but are the often much and the larger and the supported and manipulations by the roads and from the below. The technique used in the controllings and thus the puppets and bring about a the highly and the theoretical experience and the पुतल and नाच and वेस्ट बंगाल, काठी एंड द कोंड उड़ीसा में एंड यामपुरी बिहार में है। यमपुरी कहाँ पे है? बिहार में है। हेड ऑफ द ग्लोब puppets. There is the type of the puppetry and where the puppeteer's hand is the sleeped and inside the puppets and it's the movement and are the atom acted and out. Why his the fingers? Usually the finger four and the fingers and becomes the head of the puppets and the thumbs and are the third fingers act as its the two hands. The Pavakottu and Keralas. The Shaki and the Kandunai and the Nata Odisha and Beni the Putul and Bengal. Step to the revive and the modernized and puppetry arts. Government levels grants and housings help and the pensions for the seasons and artists in various the oral arts and forms and ensuring health coverage to artists and under the Ayushman Bharat or the central and the government health schemes, financial supports and from the corporate houses, NGOs, etc. Puppetry Academy. Kerala's government opened the Puppetry Academy at the Kozhikode on World and the Puppetry Days and recently to the provided the training and the research in the art in the art of puppetry. Advertisement of forthcomings and the puppetry and show the through and the newspaper mobilize and SMS and the social medias and can help the enhances the footfall. World and the Kathputli and days the 21 March help to the popularize the Kathputlis and the culture across the world and the promotions in the popular cultures and e.g. Rajasthani and the Kathputlis and puppet was used in the Hindi cinemas and Paheli. Investing in digital infrastructures and that can help the artist and take theirs the works online. Tripura Puppets and Theatre is using the YouTubes and to launch the new and the puppets videos and for the COVID-19 awareness in the community. The Sajis and the Pulaha Pulahavar and the revised the leaders and puppets of the Kerala's by the automatically it is used the robotics and workshops for the spending puppets airs and special session on drawing the movement and mime and creations writing the creatives and achieve speech and dialogues and deliveries and voice the modulations are also the organized for the participant and to enhance their the communications skills. Outrage activists and in other the countries, the government has the organized and festival of India's and award and Namaste India and countries and like the Shenegals and the Court and the Evolry and the Lynchest and Koreas and Ukraine. Bekuti dolls and from the flood averages Kerala's have now and becomes other globals and mascots. International puppet festivals in India. The puppeteers and from the around the world were aid the Datu and the International Puppet Festivals in the Bangalore in 2019. The puppeteers and from the every corners of the India and others the countries and like the Italy, Turkey and the US come and together and to the showcase and there the amazing storytellings, availability and the Isharas International Puppets and Theatres Festivals in Delhi and gave the exposures to other larger audience and the chance to the perform with the theaters arts and forms the across the globes in 2018. Conclusion: the government could also invest in other schools of the puppetry and where the pupils interested in other craft and can the take and courses and which would also means providing and the additional employment opportunities for the puppeteers. What do you understand why the regionalism and does it the essentially lead to the centralizations of power and the sustainability and use the answer with the relevant examples introductions. The regionalism is other expressions of other common sense of identity and purpose why the purpose and within other specific geographicals and regions united why it's the unique language and cultures language etc and which the result in the excessive impeachment to one and the resigns and the sometimes can be the theaters to unit and integrities of the country body decentralizations of power it is means and sharings the decisions makings and authority and which the lowest level of the institutions and the organization yes the regionalize and does lead to decentralize and of the powers of power regionalism at the local levels and example 73rd and 74th CAA and Panchayati Raj and urbans the local bodies and where the results of the risings and regional aspirations and involvement of the pupils in grass and root decisions making. Fifth and sixth schedules the basic and thrust of the third and the sixth schedules of the constitutions. It is the protections of the culture and the distinctness of the tribals, the rise of the regional parties and political parties like the DMK and the ADI. Am and Adamak and the Akali Dal and Telugus, the Desams and Assams. Ghana Parishad etc. have the encroachment, encouraged and regionalism to have the decentralized of powers and from the centers parties and there the politics is based on the regional aspiration. Safeguarding and use of the local language cultures in the name of the safeguardings and local language and cultures regionalism and leaders to the decentralized of powers example the Kodavas in the Karnataka. Rationals and movements have the helped the arts and the cultures of many the neglected regions to the flourish by the increasing their the exposures and through the local emphasis. Decentralizations of power further leads to the national integrations and regionalism is not the significant mercy is other disintegrations form and regionalism and stress the development of other regions and national integrations example role of the DMK in Tamil Nadu providing employment it is further help in the social economically development of backward region example development of the Kalyana Karnataka regions reservation of seats and for local peoples in tribal areas promotes the sense of pride in the connectings to one roots and the culturals it has been the noticed and that the often and regional movement and have the helped and the art and the cultures of many the neglected regions to flourish and by the increasing their the expose and through the local emphasis and demand for the regional autonomies within other self within the state in the some states and peoples belonging to the various regions have been and the demanding the recognitions of theirs the regional identities. Example Kodavas in Karnataka. The groups of the state join and the handles to take other common standard on the people on the issues of the mutuals interested and these either these and others groups of the states or at times and against the unions example northeasterns and state however the regionalism and can also the lead to the regionalism and sometimes and borders sub and the nationalism, and which can the created the separatist and the tendencies regionalist, and can the become a the sheet for the militancies and the extremist, and to create and the internal security threat. This lead to less and the exercisings and of powers. Example, Kashmir military issues and discriminations. In the certain cases it is developed the supremacy complex in mind of the pupils, and who have the inhabited a place and for the many years, and gives them other flesh sense of the ownerships and overs the resigns, and thus the leadings and to the son of the soils and tendencies. An incident of the expulsions of pupils of the northeast from the Bangalore and regionals and groupings lead to the VS of power and unique development of different regions, and leads to the development of the left wings and extremists. And example, northern and part of India too much the regionalism and lead to talking powers into the hand. And example, the agitations in the Maharashtra and against the migrants and from the North India, and for the talking away and jobs, and especially from the states of UP and Bihar, and discriminating based on the language. Conclusion, the formation of the Niti Aayog has been other positive steps and towards the enhancing the cooperation, federalism, and the reducing and the pro and GLs regionalism by the fostering the involvement of the states and government of India in the economic policy makings and process using other buttons of the approach. Schemes like the Ek and the Shrestha Bharat and has been launched by the GIUS is to celebrated unit in the diverse cultures of nation. Question number 16. Bring out of the reasons and for the reverence of the child marriages in India, and with the raisings of the legal ages of marriage for the girls help and the mitigates the issues or discuss. Introductions. Child marriages in the Indias is the defined as the marriages and the solemns and between the two pupils, and where the females is below the ages of the 18 years and or the males is below the ages of the 21 years, and India is the home home to the largest number of the child and the brides in the world, and accountancy and for other child and of other global local as per as the UNICEF man bodies and status of the child marriage in India. Child marriage is the widespread across India's, and with the nearly half of the whites and marriages as the girls, and while there has been deadline in the incident of child marriages nationally, and from the 54% in 1992 and 1993 and to 33% today, and in the nearly all the states the pace of the changes and remains slow, especially for girls and in the age groups 15 to 18 years. 40% of the world and 16 million child marriages take places in the according to the National Family Health Survey. Reason for the prevalence of the child marriages in India: cultural traditions and practices. The practices of the child marriages in northern India is closely associated and with poor occasions such as the Akhas Teej in the Rajasthan, and when mass and cold and weddings when mass cold weddings and taking place in many the districts. However, administrations fail in stop and bear the weddings due to the social pressures. Economic of marriage. Girls are the often seen as other liberality and with other limited economic roles, and in poor the community, and marriage of other daughters means and one less and the mouth, and the high demand for the dowry and puts the pressures on the families to marry the girls early. Safety and the security issues. ESP in the rural and the tribal areas, lack of the education a big and the Determinant of the age of the marriages is education. Around 45% of the women and with no the education and 40% and with the primarily education marriage before the age of the 18th and according to the NFSHS 4. The patriarchals, archals and the altitude and child marriages is often seen as a defense against the maritals and sex, and the duties to protect the girls and from the sexual violence and the harassments is the transferred from the father to husband. Declining sex ratios in the rural parts of the northern India and particularly in Rajasthan, and the declines sex ratio has allowed the growth of the practice and known as the Ata Satta, and where other daughters is the exchanged for other daughters-in-law, and the irrespective of her ages, effective implementations of the law and lack of the proper ages documentations, and overall lack of the protection and for the women's rights of the children, and along with the ineffective implementations of laws like the PCMA and 2006 is also other major hurdles in the eliminating child marriages. Recently, the cabinet has the approvals and increasingly the marriage age of the woman and from the 18 to 21, and if the impeachment and it will bringing the age of the marriages for the both men and the woman at par. Reason government decided to and the examine the age of the marriages for the women and for the numbers of the reasons and including the gender and neutrality. Early age of the marriages and the consequences early and the pregnancies also have impact on the nutriented levels of mothers and there's the children's and there's the overall health and the mental well-beings. How raising the age and will help to the curb and the child marriages, increasing the marriages and build a delay the women's and the responsibilities, and which is the attack to the marriage in the many and traditions society and women ages and aid the marriage act and the simultaneously as other gateway to new the families and roles and the livelihood and of the producting and of spreading thus and the increasing the marriage age will the delay and this the responsibilities and give other chance to women and for the self-governance insurance gender and equalities in the marriages age. Increasing the minimum age of the marriages for the females to 21 years ensure the gender equalities as the legal marriages age for the males is already 21 years. Different ages of the marriages and promotes the stereotypes and that the wife must be the younger and then there's the husband. Outlawed child marriages and prevented the abuse of the minors and law the prescribes the minimums age of the marriages and to the essentially outlaw child and marriages and the prevented the abuse of the minors and enormous benefits on the social and the economically front and include the lowering materials mortality ratio MMR and improvement of the nutrition levels and more the opportunity for the women to the pursue higher education